you watched my last video reviewing the first, oh my god, the sun just had this beautiful hue. That was so distracting. But thank you so much if you watched my first video recapping episodes 1 through 5 of the latest season of Love is Blind. I was very much not expecting, I guess at this point, 11,000 people to watch that. But luckily it was well received for the most part. So the show released 3 more episodes this week, which were all like really good. I enjoyed them a lot. But when you're taking people out of the pods and out of a romantic, getaway, and put them back in a real life scenario, to me at least, digesting that content was a little bit harder. Like, you look at some of the conflicts that we'll get into, but particularly with Marshall and Jackie, that stuff kind of leaves a bad feeling, So I wanted to make sure I wasn't just hopping on here and just, blabbing away and just talking about the high points or retelling the plot. I wanted to really think about these people's actions and try to give the best, kind of analysis or recap of it that I could. So I want to start off with Brett and Tiffany again. I'm going to do the same order that I did the first time. So one thing that I really enjoyed about Brett, I don't really have many negative things to say about him, as I don't believe most do. But at one point he says that he loves that Tiffany wants him to be the best version of himself. I really like that, and I think that's a great defining feature of why you should like to be with someone. Not because they're making you be a better person and trying to influence you in a way that's controlling or manipulative, but because they're actually giving you the type of connection and energy that shows, wow, they care about me so much they want me to be a better human. So I know that personally I've experienced dynamics like that with friends, family, past relationships in the past, and that's a super valuable thing. He hasn't really given me any red flags. I wrote that I think he's very affirmative towards Tiffany, which we saw in the first couple episodes. And I like that he's secure. And I say that word particularly because Tiffany, I think, is the exact opposite of that. Some people might not agree with me, but I look at Tiffany as highly insecure, at least in a romantic relationship type of setting. So the thing I wanted to mention first is I wrote on here bougie Brett, the bougie Brett conundrum. So she goes to see his apartment, which I thought was pretty. It was really like nice in terms of like a single man. But he had the what did I write? Oh yeah, he had a tension rod on his paper towel dispenser that he showed her, which made me giggle. But it's just like all these little basic little things that you could buy off Amazon to make your house a little bit more convenient. Like a soap dispenser that you could just put your hand under. Like, that's not new technology. So you can see on her face when she's going around his apartment, she's like, oh, okay. Like, you like the bougie stuff. You like the bougie stuff. Oh my God, all these shoes. He literally works for Nike. And then his shoe collection wasn't even, I don't have that many shoes at all, but that shoe collection was not insane for people who are like sneakerheads and stuff. So she continued that theme throughout the couple episodes. And one thing I didn't like about her, and I don't think like about a lot of people, is when you have passive conversation starters to allude to something that you're actually trying to say. So when she was cooking for him in the kitchen, she kind of says like, I want to just talk about our how we want to live our lifestyle, because I know like with my income and your income, blah, 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 blah. So it's just like, okay, let's have a conversation then. So he's just like, well, I'm a simple person. Obviously, simple can mean different things to different people. But then the moment he said that, then she crossed over into what she actually wanted to talk about, which is bougie Brett. So she goes, well, I don't know. Some of those things you like, some of your clothing, I was looking at the labels, like, you like nice stuff. He's like, yeah, I like some nice stuff, because he's looking at her confused, like, what are we even talking about anymore? What are we crossing over into? Because she started the conversation under false pretenses, is what I would say. So she says to him, she goes, well, what's the most you've ever spent on something? And the moment she said that, I'm like, okay, now we know what you're wanting to talk about. And this is where I feel like her insecurity comes into play. Because again, like I said in the original video, she definitely sees Brett as like a step above her in materialistic ways, and it's feeding her insecurity, it seems like to me. Not only is she insecure about the amount of money he spends on luggage, getting a $1,200 travel case or whatever, which I didn't think that was so absurd. If he makes a decent amount of money, it is what it is. But then there were 2 different instances where she kind of like questioned his security with their dynamic when they were in the house and talking about when she'd move in, because at this point They're already engaged. She's like, oh, so does it scare you that, like, I'm going to be moving in here? Like, it doesn't scare you to hear me say that? He's like, no. Because that's what y'all are doing. Y'all are getting married, Tiffany. And then when they're going on a walk and talking, what did she say? Oh, they were talking about the wedding plans. And then she was like, there's so much to do, so much to do. So it doesn't scare you about the wedding? It doesn't scare you? And he says no. So I don't have a problem with Tiffany. I don't think she's a bad human at all. She seems like a very nice person. But again, like I said, I feel like having to constantly reaffirm someone who doesn't feel secure and needs even more affirmation than Bert already gives, I'm like, that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. Y'all, the sun is coming out. Okay, it was literally raining all morning and now the sun's coming out. So the vibes can still be good, but it's nice to have the sun out when you have to sit and record a video for like an hour. So now I want to talk about Zach and Bliss. So we're going to cross out Irina, move on to Bliss. I'm smiling because the situation turned out a lot better than I anticipated in these next few episodes. So when Zach met Bliss at the restaurant, I'm sure you would all agree that they immediately had way better chemistry than, of course, him and Irina. But this is what I'll also say. I feel like out of all the couples, they have the most inherent natural chemistry of all of them. Like there was so much more ease just talking about Brett and Tiffany. Of course, there's chemistry there, but you can kind of tangibly still feel a sense of awkwardness between them. With Bliss and Zach, it definitely felt supernatural, even with her being upset with him. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. When Zach was having a conversation with Paul, when they like went out for dinner or something, he said to Paul, I don't know, was this after he already met Bliss? This was after he met her at the restaurant, I believe. Yes. But he said to Paul, he wants to be with someone he can change the world with. And he was asking him, how many times can you like throw away another person before it becomes like, I don't know, like kind of like law of diminishing return. Like eventually it's never going to get, your return's never going to get higher from constantly recycling through people. So he said, I want somebody by my side who I can change the world with. And people may see that or hear that and think it's like grandiose. But what people need to realize is I feel like that hits at the core of what marriage really should be and however you define it. So it doesn't have to be that you're changing the world, like global impact sort of thing. But what you're doing is your own little piece of the pie to make an influence on your community, on each other, on your future children, etc. So it made him grow on me, y'all. Like, I don't think he's a creep anymore, whatever. You can like call me out for that. And the only other thing I'll say about him, I'll get into like their dynamic in a second, but he talks about how he just recently moved to Seattle to start his own law firm. So he's like living his Elwoods, like Legally Blonde dream right now. But he just moved. There was some other big life change, but then now you're like also now getting engaged. So I wonder if he is good under pressure. I would assume so based on the type of career he has and all that stuff. The only other thing too that I'll say I appreciated was he's very self-reflective. So he said, I take forever to make a choice on something. I take forever to make a decision. I can relate to that. But he said, maybe this time I should just dive in. Because he knew that Bliss was the woman for him, yet to be seen. But in that moment, that's what he feels. Going on to Bliss now, I feel for her because you could tell the moment she met him in the restaurant that she was like, you know, still loving on that man. But she was trying to put up this front, which she later talks about. She wanted to put up a front to kind of maintain her pride, which you can't, I hate to say this and sound cheesy, you can't be prideful in love. So I'm kind of at a conflict because I know pragmatically when you're meeting someone who kind of did you dirty and everything, you want to put up that guard and you want to secure yourself to make sure they don't take advantage of you or hurt you again. But at the same time, girl, if you're making that decision that you want to be with him and you feel that in your heart, you can't love somebody or you can't love fully if you are guarding yourself, if you are, if you're consumed with pride. So yes, you can acknowledge that you feel those things, but girl, what are you going to do with those feelings? Because it's not going to serve yourself or him together in a relationship. Also, when they were having their conversation and she said, I'm second choice. Like, I don't like feeling like second choice. I did agree with Zach in how he explained it to her about, yeah, you would be second choice if I wanted to be with Irina and then she like ditched me. He was like, I don't want to be with her. You're not a second choice. She's not even somebody that I prioritize or want. So I think she still has something to work through with that. But hopefully she was receptive when he said that. The only other things I'll say about them, they're making me really happy. Like, I'm actually pretty excited about the two of them. This makes me a little bit emotional, but when they were having their kitchen dance, I will say I can relate to one of those like moments where you're with somebody who you're feeling so deeply. When I used to see people like dance and to know music and stuff like that, I'd be like, oh, that's so cringe. But I've had a moment like that in the past that came and went. And I will say, when you can have those special moments with someone as silly as dancing in the kitchen or messing up the steak and having to just eat the shrimp and carrots, that's something special. Like that day-to-day kind of love, you know? And then the last thing I'll say about the two of them, when they're on their little boat tour and he's talking to her and he says to her, like, if you could meet one person, who would you meet? Instead or alive? He's like, whatever, if you want to meet a person. Which I'm like, boy, it's Oprah. If you could meet any person, you want to meet Oprah. Like, let's come on, girl. You can do better than that. Maybe y'all don't agree, but when his response to her was, if he could meet one person, he said, I'd meet your parents. Y'all can tell me if y'all cringed at that, but I thought it was very sweet. He obviously planned to say it, but I just thought that was really sweet. I cannot sit here and lie to y'all. I shed a little tear. Don't tell nobody. Okay. So I think that's all I want to say about them. I have high hopes for them, and I hope the best for them. They really do seem like a great match, so we will see what happens. Y'all, this is a special day. I'm telling you. As I stopped recording the last part, a crane just flew up above where I was sitting. Like, I just saw it, like, fly through the sky. I'm telling you, like, God bless this day, for real, because I've felt that in my spirit since this morning. So I'm just, like, I'm feeling really good. All right, so the next couple that I want to talk about is Marshall and Jackie. So I'm going to say a few things, and then I got to hop into the conflict that they had, and then Jackie's conversation with John. So I'm going to get to those things. But first thing I'll say about Marshall, that scene of him making that breakfast, and he got the little, he literally, I still think he thinks he's in a movie. He thinks he's a movie character. When he served Jackie her meal and then did the little powdered sugar, something about Marshall, this is what he gives me. He gives me somebody who's like, okay, the camera crew's showing up. And I think he literally sat there and was like, oh, this is going to be a nice shot. Me sprinkling the powdered sugar. I don't know. I just don't like him, especially after what he did in this season, or these couple episodes, but we'll talk about that. I said in the last video, if I had to say I related to someone the most, it was Jackie, which y'all might hate on me for saying that because clearly y'all are not a fan of Jackie. The general public doesn't seem to be a fan of her. But I still feel that way, and I will talk about why. But there was this conversation they had in the kitchen when she was about to meet part of his family, and she just wasn't in a good mood. You guys, we got to remember, these scenes are so out of context, and I will say, particularly, it seems like when it's a scene with Jackie and Marshall, it's like super out of context, because I just never know why the mood is the way it is when they start a scene. It's very weird. She wasn't feeling good about meeting the family because she wasn't in a good mood. So she was being honest with herself. And she said, I can't keep living by my family and not living my life. So my assumption, because again, we lacked so much context, is that in the weeks that they've been together, like all the things we don't see, she's probably talked with her family as she's expressed, and they expressed major discontentment with whatever the situation is with this show, with the engagement, and that bothers her. I think it would be a great miss for everybody watching the show to look at her express that and to think, oh, I don't even want to say the word people are saying about her, but you can't just say someone's emotionally unregulated because they're expressing themselves in a way that you would not. And I'm really going to dive into that in a second. But I like that she's honest with herself. She doesn't feel well because she's feeling impacted by her other people's perception of her, how her family perceives her, how her actions influence how they feel. Some people can detach from that and don't care. She clearly cares, and clearly it's causing her like some kind of like harm. It's giving her anxiety about the situation. And I can totally relate to her because I'm sure some of you can too. It's really hard and a lot of pressure when you're living your life by other people, when you're living your life to impress other people, and when you're not putting yourself first. That's a real issue for a lot of people, and something that I've had to grow out of myself. So I can relate to her on that. Now I want to talk about their conflict, because that's the majority of the what we see of them in the episodes, unfortunately. So Marshall, to me, is an extreme... Marshall, to me, is very manipulative. He does manipulative things. I'm going to read little segments of like their argument that I found particularly interesting. I have said particularly like 7 times already. So there's this whole dynamic where apparently they're like in the bed, something we don't see. And she's saying she wants him to be more aggressive and like boss up, or I don't know what it was. But we all know that she was definitely talking about in the bedroom. That was a private conversation they had off camera. And although that obviously probably hurt his feelings, that's a hard conversation that you might have to have with someone about like your intimacy or whatever, you know. And I say that in particular, a hard conversation. Remember that. So he comes back after he leaves the house that day, apparently, because he was so mad about her comments. And then she's talking about the comment about being aggressive. And he says, well, when I'm aggressive, you shut me down. And then she goes, you're never aggressive, Marshall. And then his immediate response is, well, that's not who I am. I'm like, Marshall, then why did you just say when you're aggressive, she shuts you down if you're not ever aggressive? Like, weird. But then they keep going with the conversation. And she says, well, why are you with me if you feel like I don't ever like make you feel like seduced or whatever? And he says to her, because I saw you as a project, but you have potential. Bro, what? So, again, I will interrupt myself to say, he delivered that line like he was in a movie. And then later they moved down to the kitchen area. And they're still going back and forth. She's kind of like brought her energy down because what he just said hurt her feelings. And he said, I feel like I can be that person to bring the limitless potential out of you. Marshall, you? I mean, I have my own personal thoughts about that, but I'm like, for us talking to one another right now, or y'all listening to me right now, don't ever think that you are so powerful that you are unlocking someone's limitless potential. Yeah, there's mentorship, etc. But to sit there and act like you are so like high and mighty and that you've put yourself on this pedestal that you have to bring Jackie up to, that's very conceited. But I mean, to each his own, I guess. And here's the thing that I thought was super interesting. She hurt his feelings off camera and he left the house. Then when he hurt her feelings when they were back in the house, he flipped it back on her and said to her, after she got upset about his comments, well, that's what marriage is about. Sometimes you have to have a hard conversation. But you fled the scene when y'all had to have a hard conversation off camera. I don't like this man. So going back to what I said about the emotional dysregulation and thinking that about people just because they express themselves more like fervently or whatever. Here's the thing I'll say about the Marshall and Jackie dynamic. I wrote here, he's all about feeling and she's all about action. And I feel like that was exemplified in their conflict. We talked about how last time in the pods he said that he's guided by his emotions, okay? And she's clearly an action-based person, always having to be there for people, always having to XYZ. So when she expressed her concern with him about not being aggressive, it was all about action in the moment. And then when he expresses how he is doing, it's all feelings based. I feel like people are seeing her be more vocal or louder and thinking she's like this super emotionally dysregulated person. But I would actually like beg to say, I would actually like offer this up to everybody. What if he's actually a little bit more emotionally dysregulated? She obviously has room to grow in the emotional department. But just because someone is more expressive doesn't mean they're more dysregulated than the next person. Someone can suppress how they're feeling and then only give you little tidbits, but it's always going to come out a different way. For Marshall, it comes out as him being manipulative and kind of like, shady in that way. I mean, at the end of their conflict, they're in the kitchen, and then what does she do? The girl that everybody thinks is so like ridiculous and wishy-washy, she goes up to him and apologizes because she made him feel bad. And I don't think that's a sign of her being flip-floppy. I think that's a sign of her true nature of not wanting to create conflict. But then he didn't apologize for the comment he made about treating her as a project. He did not apologize, unless I missed it. All he said was, it was the heat of the moment. How do you call someone a project in the heat of the moment? You plan to say that, Marshall. You plan to say it. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is Jackie's conversation with John. If y'all even who is John? I know who is John, but the show brought him back just to kind of bring some more conflict into it. So they're having this birthday celebration for Chelsea where everybody shows up. John shows up, he's getting drunk and all this stuff. And then Jackie comes a little bit later than Marshall. Keep in mind, again, this common theme. I'm spending so much time talking about them, but I feel like this is an important story in these episodes. Marshall comes in and immediately starts talking trash about Jackie to Brett. You would think by the way Marshall described the situation that Jackie was a domestic terrorist. You would truly think that she was just this nasty woman, like Brett's patting his back or whatever. And then Jackie comes in the room, says nothing nasty about Marshall, walks up to him and gives him a kiss. I'll let y'all do with that information what you will. And then of course, you can't stand how Jackie's treating you, but the moment you see John look at her, oh, put on my jacket, Jackie. Okay. Anyway, I can't. I don't like him. So, last thing I'll say about Jackie, she is the only person, I'm going to bat for this girl. She is the only person in the relationships who doesn't entertain conversations with another connection that she had. I will also say Paul too, because he didn't speak to Amber in that episode when she came to the party. But when John walked up, she was barely giving him any kind of she wasn't encouraging conversation. She didn't entertain him. She barely gave him eye contact. I know some people will give her some slack for when he said he's a lover boy and she says she likes that. Okay, whatever. But she did not seek out conversation with him. The show invited him to the party. So then again, she's sitting with her friends, never approached John, and I hope that's is that his name? If I edit this and that's actually not his name, I'm gonna feel bad, but I think his name is John. But he comes up drunk to talk to her. He asked to talk to her separately, and then they have a conversation. Nothing that she did was anything close to the conversations Micah and Kwame were having and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I'm gonna leave this couple. Now, I do have one little critique about her conversation with John. And this is from my personal perspective. I'm not having a serious conversation with a drunk person. I'm not doing it, okay? He walks up, he's blubbering his words, all this stuff. And she even says, I've never had serious conversations with you before now. And I'm like, girl, why are you trying to right now when he is literally drunk? And the other thing I'll say, John really tried to hit her with some finesse. He was like, because we have some connection that goes beyond the lights. Okay, John. So that's all I have to say about this couple for now. Obviously, they do not belong together. And I think about a lot of these people is they probably should just be in therapy individually. Lord. All right. So now we got Paul and Micah. Paul is just, he's an interesting man. I wrote this quote that he said to Zach when they were meeting for drinks, and I think one of the episodes. When he was talking about Micah, he said she meets the minimum criteria for a perfect woman. Okay, again, you're giving NPC vibes, but he says he's logical and analytical, which I can respect that in a career setting. But all I know is personally, I can't be with somebody like that. I don't want to look at someone who's crunching the numbers on our love. I'm not really a fan of that. But it's not a personal attack against him. That's just the way his brain works. So it is what it is. When Micah met his mother, I actually thought that was a really sweet scene. And Micah was right that basically that you're marrying your mother. Because they're very similar in affect and everything like that. And the only other thing I really have to say about Paul is when he goes with Micah to her best friend's birthday party and he talks with them, he's trying his best to be personable. You're meeting a bunch of people you've never met on camera. They're questioning you. The girl says, so I just need to know, are you serious? Which a lot of people on this show like to ask that of the people. And he gave a snapback that I feel like I would have given. He was like, well, I don't take a lot of relationships unseriously to start. But yeah, I wouldn't take an engagement lightly either. Which I'm like, ooh, okay, a little fire to you, Paul, okay. But the awkwardness between him and Micah when he kind of whispered to her, like, yeah, I'm here, but like, I don't really care about her opinion. I got what he was saying. I don't think he was being rude. I think he was saying, your friend is being kind of rude right now, but I'm secure. I don't really care what she has to say. It's about us at the end of the day. And that's a good point because y'all have crossed over into adulthood. Yes, you can consult your friends to get their opinion on your relationships to keep you safe and check out any blind spots you may have. But when you're at a party and everyone's half drunk, like, yeah, I'm with you, Paul. I'm not about to sit here and entertain somebody like dissing me. When we're grown, I don't want to curse, when we're grown adults. Okay. So on to little Miss Micah. Let me stop being mean about this girl. But on to Micah. So we start off with her questioning Paul when they move in about his interaction with Irina. And then they show the scene after he, says, yeah, she was like touching on my leg and Zach was standing right there. And then Micah hits him with the, well, it just makes me uneasy and uncomfortable to hear that she was attracted to you. I just want to make sure there's not anything deeper happening. I'm like, Love is Blind. Can y'all do like a cutback scene to when you were filling up on Kwame and holding his hand at the pool? And can we do a Raven Simone flash forward to the future when you're at the bar talking about you don't know if you made the right decision? Micah, girl, please. And then cutting to the scene of her confronting Irina at the restaurant. I wrote on here she was scolding her minion. She was, like, Irina's her little minion. I wrote here, I put a little star, and I was like, there's a lesson to be learned here. If you were an Irina in someone's life, maybe you're not as mean as a person as Irina, but when you are so easily moldable and malleable into what people want you to be in a situation, you really have to be careful and watch for that. Because Micah facilitated a lot of Irina's nastiness when they were in the living quarters. Just one of the examples being telling her to crawl and eavesdrop on a conversation where someone was crying. But then Micah, she literally was scolding her minion in that moment. She was like, okay, well, I've manipulated you to do what I want you to do, and now people are all going to have this impression of you. But now I'm kind of mad at you because you're kind of giving me some nastiness back, and I don't like that. She literally said to Irina, I was your lifeline. No one would even talk to you in the living quarters when they were at the pods. So I feel like that's very indicative of how, again, Micah's very intelligent in the sense that she completely knew the dynamic that she created between herself and Irina. I guess Irina just wasn't fully aware of that. And the only other thing I really have to say about Micah is, maybe like two more things. She gives me iRobot. I'm trying to like learn how to be a humanoid, because she even pointed out when her and Paul had to have a serious conversation at his apartment about where they will live in the future, whether it be Arizona, Seattle, splitting their time. And she goes, it's so strange. Like, I look at Paul and think, who is this? Whenever we have to have a conversation, he completely like changes. I'm like, you're so observant, Micah. Like, you really do absorb what people are putting out. But then you still, I don't know. She absorbs what people are putting out, and then she comments on it, but then there's no real like serious action taken behind it. How do you expect to have a real serious conversation with Paul and grow a relationship when between every word you say in a sentence, you are giggling? This girl is the giggle queen. Okay? All right, guys. So we have reached our final couple. You already know. So we got Kwame and Chelsea. I feel like we learned a lot these episodes about the two of them. So Kwame, I'm not going to go as hard on him as I did the last time. I got out what I wanted to say about how he views himself. But now I feel like I got a better view of how he acts in relationships. With Kwame and Chelsea, it very much is giving me mother-son dynamic. Not because she like looks a lot older or anything like that, but because, one, did y'all clock how many times he called her ma'am? Oh my God, if I was in a relationship and then the guy was calling me ma'am, I would be very uncomfortable because he's articulating in a passive way how he views the dynamic. I wrote some examples of this being like when she's talking to him about the dishes and he tried to clap back about her flushing the toilet, which, ew, girl, flush that toilet. But about how she didn't like dishes staying in the sink overnight. And I don't like to, I'm going to say this and then people are going to like judge me, whatever. I don't think there's anything wrong if you have brushed off your plate and you put a dish in the sink and rinsed it off for the night. Unless you're dealing with a cockroach infestation and you just already have a nasty home, what is wrong with leaving a plate in the sink overnight? I'm just saying. I'm not talking about soaking pots. I'm just saying, like, she was doing a little bit too much with that, in my opinion. Like, you're okay with leaving your feces in the toilet. You're okay with leaving your feces in the toilet overnight, but he can't leave a plate in the sink. Then also her kind of taking like the diminutive role. I don't know if that's a word. I hope so. But taking the diminutive role in where they will definitely be living. Talks in his side interview about all his routines and habits being based where he lives in Portland, but he didn't really articulate that, at least from what we saw, to her. And then, you know, like, he almost set himself up to create a mother-son dynamic when he was with her. When I saw that he was, like, when he said that he sleeps on the couch primarily, I'm like, dude, you still have the mentality of someone who needs to be mothered. So I don't know what you were expecting to get out of this relationship when you sleep on a couch, when you have a bed. So that's just a thought that I have. And the only other thing about Kwame, or no, I think I have two more things for him too. When they had that conversation on the couch about meeting her dad, I'm like, who is her dad? Like, what is he about to do? Like, I was scared. But before he came in, which we'll talk about, my hand was all up in the frame just then. I will tell y'all, I don't know how y'all feel. I'm not here to impress anybody's parents. I am not. And people can say more traditionally, well, no, it's not. They just want to make sure their child is being taken care of. I'm like, let's be real, y'all. Half the time, y'all's parents don't care about what's going on in your life after you turn 18. Like, you are on your own. So why suddenly now that I'm partnering up, do I need to impress you or turn on the charm to make you accept me or the spouse that I'm trying to have? I'm not impressing anybody's parents. Of course, I'm going to be authentic to myself. But if they have an issue with me, I don't even know you. Shouldn't you be trying to impress me too? I'm marrying into your family. That's just my personal thought. And then the only other thing, so with that, the dad comes in and the show tries to make the scene really tense. Like, when I saw this man's face look like this, I was like, oh no, I think we all know what's coming. But he was fine with it. And it was a nice little interaction. And then the only other thing about Kwame is when he spoke with Micah again at Chelsea's birthday party. They just revealed how they're just going through the motions. Like, he expressed that he wasn't really secure when Micah inquired with his relationship. And then Micah flip-flopped, because I remember her telling her best friend that she's definitely in love. She definitely loves him at the party. But then when she's at the next party with Kwame, now it's, I don't know, like, it's like a day-by-day thing. It's like, girl, you are something else. Okay, everything I say about these people can't be bad. So I'll say one thing about Chelsea to start. When she was showing Kwame her apartment, I was about to say her living quarters. When she was showing Kwame her apartment and there was all these splashes of pink and he inquired about it, and she talked about how in her last relationship she couldn't really express herself through decorating her house. I'm like, girl, what kind of relationship? Like, your man wouldn't let you have a pink Keurig? Okay. But I could relate to that in the sense of maybe not in a decorative way, but you can be in a relationship and have that suppression and then finally getting to live your life and express yourself in the way that you most authentically want to. So I could give her that. Like, I like that she's able to express herself clearly at most times. I will give her that. That's the one positive about her. Moving on to how I really feel, though. I still stand by what I said in my original video about Chelsea being fake. From what I've seen on social media, most people are kind of a fan of her, to be honest. But I feel like I'm picking up on some nuance about her that maybe people aren't taking the time to reflect on fully. So I have several little notes here so I'm going to be looking down quite a bit, but I want to make sure I cover the things I wanted to say about her. We need to stop focusing on, we as a collective need to stop focusing just on people's demeanor and look beyond that initial layer, okay? Like, and I feel like I hit on that a lot with Jackie and like kind of seeing past that initial layer that we perceive. Chelsea definitely is a dreamer, but I don't think she's an optimist. I don't think she's optimistic about how a relationship will turn out. I think she is a dreamer, a fantasizer. which in the fantasy that she creates about what kind of relationship she would want, she tries to make a person fit that mold by, I don't want to jump the gun, but I think she's a dreamer. So just follow me on this path that I'm going down. I talked about in my last video about how Kwame wants a lot of validation and she provides that. But he even started to notice when they were moving into their apartment, she says some kind of one-liner, and he said to her, like, you're really good at those like little cheesy one-liners. And that's exactly what I was like thinking when I originally talked about her being fake. When Zach says little things to Bliss that are maybe a little cheesy, you can still tell that it's coming from an authentic place. When Chelsea does it, she is just trying to say the things that she believes will validate Kwame to get what she wants. So I wrote here, she's able to validate her love and care for Kwame, but for some reason, that validation never comes into play in other areas. So I noticed that in these episodes. She's only validating him because she wants things from him. Because when Kwame talks, you can see on his face that he's not happy about having to leave Portland. She can read that on his face. She can read it, but she does not inquire about it. She doesn't ask him to express himself more. The only time I see her trying to get him to express himself more was just making sure that he wasn't trying to leave her for Micah. But when you see that he's upset about probably moving, when you see that he wasn't interested in having kids very soon, I feel like her validation kind of fell flat there. Like, you weren't really affirming his desire to travel and get to know you and spend years with you before starting a family. So she, instead of trying to validate him, she just goes, so do you even want to settle down? And I will take what she said there and use that in my closing points about the, do you even want to settle down? I didn't want to make this video today and then just be talking about people. I wanted us to walk away from it, if you've made it this far, having things that we can take personally into our own lives and implement. That conversation they had at that dog wash station where she asked him if he wants to settle down, when we all could see the divergence in the paths that they want to take in a marriage, people need to really start assessing what they view marriage as and what they want to create from that. That's what I was talking about earlier with Zach and how he wants to change the world with his partner. Everybody needs to have some kind of creed or some kind of intention that they hold on to as their guiding light in their romantic relationships. So Chelsea, if your guiding light is, I want to have children and settle down, but Kwame's guiding light is, I want to see all that life has to offer without the being tied down by a dog or a child. Like, when he said he felt tied down by the dog, I'm like, girl, he definitely does not want to have kids right now. I'm so off track, but people need to think about how they define what a marriage is to them and stop isolating themselves into this box of, once you get married, you do X, Y, Z. You gotta find that person, or you may never find that person. You may even come to realize marriage isn't the path for you, but you gotta find that person who defines a union in the same way you do. It doesn't just stop at, I just want to be with you and only you and have monogamy. That is not what marriage just is. It's a team. It's a dynamic where you're building each other up, like Brett said about Tiffany wanting him to be the best that he can be. You have to find the essence of what a relationship is to you, what a marriage is to you, extending even beyond romantic into your friends and your family. But I think a lot of people, but outside of Love is Blind, are at a miss when it comes to stuff like that, because we don't want to really have that internal dialogue with ourselves. And I'm not just saying that as an observer. I'm saying that as someone with that same lived experience, where I've had to reflect with myself and say, God, why would I want to be married? Like, you can have the desire to have children, but why do I want to be married? You can have the desire to want to experience and feel love, but why do I want to be married? Insert different words there. So, I just want to end the video with that. I'm excited to see what comes next. I know they had some like funny little teasers, but I think shows like this, or just when people comment on people on shows like this, can do a better job of saying, well, where do we go from here, because we're seeing a lot of negativity, especially in these last couple episodes, but how can we take what we see from these people on these shows who are sacrificing themselves and their sanity to be on this type of stuff, what can we take from them to encourage us to be better in our own lives? So again, I want to thank you all for watching. If you have watched all this video, I feel like this is going to be quite a bit longer than the last. Please subscribe if you would like to watch more. I'll definitely make another video for the last couple episodes and then the reunion. And I'm sure they do some kind of like follow-up party like they always do for the other seasons. But like the video as well. Please leave a comment. The comments on the last one were hilarious, and I would love to read them all. So it was great having you all join me today, and I will definitely see you on the next video. Bye.